Hello everyone, this is Bishop Hannafeld again in our Lenten journey, reflecting upon the capital sins. This week I'd like to reflect on the capital sin of anger. This is one certainly that we all experience to some degree, and in that regard it's one that we can also ask the Lord for grace around. Anger really is a disordered, uncontrolled feelings of hate and wrath toward others. And you might say, well, wow, that sounds awfully extreme. I don't think I've ever gone there or it's not experienced the sin of anger in that regard. But I think really have to look at it as a deep drive in ourselves to indulge in those feelings of hatred and resentment. And there's a lot of resentment in the world today. This anger despises others and often seeks their revenge. So you can see how something like a disagreement or a disappointment, perhaps a frustration, can simmer, you might say, in our hearts until that point comes where now it's serious. Now we're noticing these strong feelings of true anger toward others. St. Thomas Aquinas says the daughters of anger are quarreling, contempt for others, and derision. That is, to run them down, to tear them apart. And in that regard, if this is happening, those should really be red flags to us that something is getting a little out of control in our hearts. Resentment, then, is a real challenge for many people. And this week, as we reflect on the capital sin of anger, we might look especially at resentment. In Latin, to resent is to feel again. Sentire means to feel. Resentment, to feel again. In other words, to bring back up and to go over it again as though it just happened. And sometimes we do that for years and years. Over time, anger and resentment is manifested then sometimes in rage toward others, or sometimes just in rage that affects those around us who are innocent, you might say, have nothing to do with that which is simmering within us. But the remedy, the virtue for anger is meekness and charity. Meekness sounds like a weakness in many ways in our culture today. But meekness really is the appropriate response to anything that we experience. And in this case, when someone hurts our feelings or upsets us or we're disappointed, it's the middle ground, you might say, between too much anger and not enough anger with regard to the events of life. It's the proper level of response, meekness to the things that would otherwise upset us. True Christian charity, another virtue here, is that charity is to love others for their own sake. It doesn't mean we have to be close friends, but charity demands that we love and want the best good for the other. And in that regard, sometimes when we're angry at somebody, to pray for their good is a simple remedy in that regard. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus says, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who persecute you. Again, those are great remedies for the sin of anger in our hearts in this Lenten season. St. Paul reminds us that while we're yet sinners, Christ died for us. In that regard, that we don't deserve God's love and mercy. In many ways, perhaps to forgive another in our life, if they're not apologetic, they don't maybe deserve it, but it's Christ-like to forgive even before they ask. And so you can see how charity, especially, and meekness can combat and go against anger in our lives and bring about healing there. So this week, as we continue the Lenten journey that we're on, looking at the capital sins in our life, as we consider anger and how that happens, especially if there's manifestations of resentment in our hearts, we might especially adopt that gospel passage that says, the measure you measure with will be measured back to you. So let us pray then for the grace of a new way of seeing a situation, perhaps seeing it as an opportunity rather than simply with the heart that resents. May God bless you and continue to strengthen you in your conversion of this Lenten season.